Good morning and welcome to the end of week 2 of Eastern Energy Expo on demand as it relates to our live morning programming. Every morning for the month of August at 10 a.m. we're bringing a different live program to you. Please recall that we have the virtual trade show open all month. My name is Eric DeJezero, and on behalf of Eastern Energy Expo and our co-sponsoring associations, thank you for joining us this morning. This morning we have someone who, it's not a trade show without this man, in my opinion. He has been a cornerstone of my trade show participation in this industry for the over a quarter century that I've had the good fortune to be part of it. Alan Levine is a gentleman of the first order. He has been a cornerstone of this industry. The fact that there are contracts that allow you to hedge, Alan was part of that way back when, that brought that tool to you as a marketer. Today, Alan is going to be talking to us about whale oil, the story of success for an oil dealer. It's kind of hard to introduce a man that needs no introduction, but for somebody that might be 10 years old watching this, Alan is the chairman and chief executive officer of Powerhouse and has been a petroleum specialist for over 50 years and is an expert on the relationship of energy futures to cash petroleum markets. He has extensive knowledge of crude oil, natural gas, and other energy pricing, transportation, and supply in world energy markets. He is listed in Who's Who in America and Who's Who in the East Coast since 1996. Alan is an internationally recognized specialist in crude oil pricing and petroleum business practice, and served as an expert witness for the government of Israel regarding the value of crude oil in the Sinai Desert. He is a regular contributor to the oil and gas report, the American Oil and Gas Reporter, writing the monthly column Market Matters. He's a past president of the National Capital Area Chapter of the International Association for Energy Economics. Mr. Levine holds the General Commodities License Series 3, a bachelor's degree in economics from Rutgers University. Way to go. And a master's in economics from Columbia. That's a bit above my pay grade in the Graduate School of Business. Alan has served as a lecturer, consultant, speaker, friend, and confidant to many in this industry for a very long time. And I am pleased once again to have our friend Alan Levine with us this morning. So with that, I'm going to hand off, because you know wherever Alan is, Elaine is not far behind. So Elaine Levin, you are now going to be the presenter. I am going off screen. Housekeeping, anybody has a question, please use the question or chat function. We will be monitoring them, and Alan will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. So without any further ado, Alan, sir, the floor is yours, and thank you as always.
Well, Eric, thank you very much. I wish I knew this guy who you were talking about, because I'm Al Levine, and it's a pleasure to really be here. This is a story that I'm going to talk a little bit about, the ability of the petroleum industry to see change and to adapt to it, and what can happen if you do so. And I would like to say first that I've been in the oil industry since 1969. I was fortunate enough to be in a position in 1977 and 1978 to be part of the gang that put together the whole whole heating oil futures contract, a contract that still trades to this day under the symbol HO, although it's very far from heating oil as it was when it all began. In 1982 or so, I became a broker, and as a broker, started to deal more directly with questions that clients had about hedging, how they should do it, how they should establish positions and watch them, and so on. My company, Powerhouse, does that, and we're intimately involved with many people who are concerned about price protection and how they can do it in such a way as to be healthy and safe for all of them. These days, we deal with people in crude oil, in petroleum products, heating oil, gasoline, propane, a great story in its own of change, natural gas, electricity, biofuels, and now even environmental credits. So that's who we are. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the reason that I thought this would be a useful conversation for us to have here this morning. When I became a broker in 1982 or so, my first client was a gasoline distributor in Chicago. And since it was the mercantile exchange concept was new and no one was really clear about how this was all going to shake out, but they signed up as hedging clients, and I flew out to meet them in Chicago. I remember flying into Midway Airport and taking a ride up to their facility, which was located on the Chicago River. The company involved had been in business since sometime in the 1860s. In 1982, this was something like their 9th generation of same family ownership. They had done very well for themselves. As I say, they were located on the Chicago River, and as part of their history, of which they were proud, they had a small museum that they'd set up with all sorts of paraphernalia, memorabilia, and on your screen now you can see some of that they would have had. Gas pumps with a globe on top, which you haven't seen in a very, very long time. There's one for Shell, and I think next to it, Sinclair. They had many examples of motor oil, and they had other things as well, including neat's foot oil, which was of animal origin as well. So this was a place that really, if you went through it, it was a walk down memory lane of an industry that had been in tremendous change. In addition to the things that they had inside the building, they also had taken the building and repainted it in the original colors of the company that had been used in the 1860s. And on the side of the building, they listed the commodities that they were selling at the time. And at the top, it said gasoline. No, it didn't say gasoline. I'm sorry. It said it said coal, kerosene, and whale oil. Whale oil was a big commodity at that time, and the slide before you shows an advertisement from a ship chandler of the period who sold not only whale oil, but sperm oil, lard, tanner's oil, candles, rice, all the things that the well-equipped sailing vessel would have used at that time. And so it had begun as an industry at that time. What was really interesting was, and if you look at this slide, those commodities that they're selling, sperm oil, whale oil, lard oil, all of these are animal products. Imagine 150 years ago, American industry ran on animal-based products. Some of them very important. One of them, just as again a reminder of the past, was neat's foot oil, which was made from the bones of cattle. Neat's foot oil was a very big deal if you were a kid. When I was a kid, if you got a new baseball mitt, it was made of leather. I don't know if they make them of leather anymore, probably not. But at the time they did, and the big deal was you got a big can of neat's foot oil and started to soften up the leather with that. Beyond that, it became a big ritual. You'd put a baseball into it, you'd wrap the whole thing up and maybe sit that way over the winter. So when the spring came, you were all set. You can still buy neat's foot oil from Ace Hardware. I'm not even kidding. It's still in use. It's still apparently what people who break in baseball mitts rely on to this day. Well, the next slide that you see here says new technology, new fuels. If you see the blue line, that is whale oil. And as you can see, whale oil consumption topped out somewhere around 1850 or so, and then started to fall off because it was being overtaken by a new commodity, probably kerosene at the time. And so we saw the first of a great number of changes that became so important in the petroleum industry. The fact that one company could stay in business through 9 generations and through the changes that we saw is really a tribute to the sort of change we have and have experienced and dealt with. Next slide, please. Okay, so just as the commodities that we're selling have changed dramatically, the ways in which we're doing it are different as well. I said I was part of the group that put together the heating oil contract in 1977, and what that really comes to is this. This is a picture of the pit where prices were determined by bids and offers from either side. And the floor was an extraordinary sight to see. It was a wonderful and interesting place. We could speak hours about the floor. The floor, like many things in our lives, is gone. And we no longer have a floor. We don't have fancy hand signals, and we don't have anything like the great stories that people can tell of what life was in that environment. What we have now is a screen. Screen's not as much fun. It's got a lot of information, however, and it allows you to work through very sometimes complex arrangements to get the sort of arrangements you might like in your business and in their pricing. So we've gone from whale oil, we've gone to kerosene and forward, we've gone from open outcry trading on the MERC floor, now gone. It's now a screen, and we live and die with that screen moving forward. There are things that haven't changed. The dynamics of the market haven't changed at all. In the past, we would say that fear meets greed, the two determinants of price. It met them in public, as you could see, this open outcry method work. Again, that's gone. But now the same thing happens, but it happens in private. And the young man looking at those screens is undergoing the same kinds of thinking about where price might be as he might have done when we had the pits. So that has not changed. The emotion involved has not changed. It's just taking a different form. And the other thing that really hasn't changed has the fact that hedgers want guidance, still need guidance. And I think one of our great losses, frankly, is the placement of orders by individuals themselves, because they missed that component as again, we change. So we were talking about the change, and a specifically interesting change is propane. Propane futures are yet another example of the changes we've seen. Propane has not always been traded on the mercantile exchange. In 1971, it was listed at the New York Cotton Exchange, and it was the first propane futures contract, physical delivery, just as you have now with ULSD. And it survived okay on the Cotton Exchange. But as the mercantile exchange gained prominence as the energy exchange, in 1987, they took over the physically traded and physically delivered futures contract in propane. It didn't do all that well. And at one point, the open interest in the number of contracts in propane was six. And that 6 we knew about because we were the broker on the 6. But that couldn't sustain a market. And at some point in 2009, the physically traded propane futures were delisted, and NYMEX began to trade a propane futures contract, which was very, very different. It was a financial settlement, no physical delivery required, and it was also an average of the month, because that's the way in which the physical world was now starting to price propane. It's really become one of the real mainstays of the business. And I know in my audience, I'm talking to any number of you who began with heating oil and now service propane as well. Move forward. Here's a chart that shows you how important propane has become. The biggest contract is the Mont Belvieu propane contract. And you can see in the bottom, the green block is really the number of contracts outstanding. And you can see again, as time has advanced from 2011, when this chart begins, to a point where now there's routinely anywhere around 130,000 contracts in propane, which is a very, very substantial contract and has become the basis of pricing in the markets today. Next, please. So when I began as a broker, I had two contracts to work with. I could hedge using heating oil, or I could use crude oil. That's all there was until probably 1986 or so, when gasoline became listed. Today, energy price risk management is ubiquitous in the industry. Very little gets done without reference to what's going on the MERC, and there are hundreds of contracts available. And here's a list of them. I won't read it all, but I'll point out that it has things on it that weren't even imagined years ago. Biofuels, electricity, emission controls, and most recently, environmental credits. We've just begun our involvement in that, and that's going to become an important issue as we move forward, and care for the environment becomes even more important in our everyday lives. I should mention also, there is a weather contract available as well, and that has proven to be very valuable to dealers who have suffered because of low heating degree days in the last several years. So as we move forward now, this chart shows the reality that we're dealing with. Oil is still the major source of energy in use in the world, but it is losing its market share. And if you look, you can see the share has been taken up by natural gas, and way at the bottom, renewables. This has become the direction in which we are going, and the direction in which many of our clients have decided to move as well. Thanks. Okay, so the question next is, what's next for you? Because after all, that's what this is about. As I say, we've had clients that have adopted propane, electricity, natural gas, and these are options available to you as well. One of the things that you may consider is to become greener, because you're requiring environmental credits, a different conversation. We've also added biofuels to the mix, which is very desirable by many, many consumers. And as I said, diversify into other fuels like propane and natural gas. Over the longer time, the question is, what's going to happen with oil and gas? Could technology, carbon capture, could they allow continued use of oil and gas? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to give you my guess, which will be, yes, there'll be plenty of oil and gas in use in 2050. I might point out that hydrogen, which is being touted as one of the replacements for distillate fuels, hydrogen is manufactured from natural gas itself. So there's good reason that we'll think that there'll be continued use of petroleum as we move forward in this new century. And of course, we're now seeing vehicles powered by electricity. And the question is, will that become an important factor? And again, we think the answer is yes, but note the 3 question marks. So much has changed, so much is going to change, that the best thing you can do is be alert, aware, and on it. Next, please. But with all of this, with all of the change that we've outlined here, from whale oil to kerosene to weather futures, we've had a lot of change. We've had a lot of embracing of that change. But here's what's not going to change, and what you should always think about. Customers want to be comfortable in their homes, whether it's produced from hydrogen or from distillate fuels or electricity. They want to be comfortable. People and things need to move. So if we're looking for heat or we're looking for transportation, that will not change. The instruments may change, but the need will be with us. And because you're so involved with your own customers, you are in a relationship business. You have a book of business in your customer lists. You're in a service business, and there's no business that is more service oriented than the home heating oil delivery industry. So those won't change. And because many of you have been in this, some of you 5, 6 generations, if I have somebody with more than 9, I'd like to know about them. That said, this is where we are today. We've been servicing our customers for over 38 years, and we've seen them weather a great deal of change, whether they wanted to or they didn't. Probably that's why we have weather futures. I'm sorry, I just had to say it. And I know that we'll be using weather futures again for a long, long time. And if whale oil ever comes back on stage, I guarantee you there'll be a futures contract, and Powerhouse will be available to trade it on your behalf. Thanks very, very much. And I'm open for any questions that there may be. So Eric, did Eric fall off the face of the earth on me? No, Eric. Okay.
No, I am here.
Okay. Is anybody else there?
Yes, we have others here, and let me go to the question box. Okay, this was I'm sorry, the question I see here was a logistical question that we were able to handle using it was not a question about the presentation. I do not see, I'm going to both question for venues and do not see a question, and I will have somebody whisper in my ear if I am missing something, but I do not see a question.
Well, that's okay. I'll ask questions.
Yes, that's perfect.
And my first question is going to be, where do we think the next risk element is going to be looked at more carefully? And whether or not you like it, I'm going to ask Elaine to answer that question, because she's dying here. She's not good at being quiet. Elaine Levin, my partner for over 30 years now.
What was the question?
What's that?
The question is, where do we see the next risk?
Yeah.
Well, I guess if I go on here.
I've never seen Elaine at a loss for words.
Get my camera.
And we do have a question. When Elaine is done, a question has come in, Alan.
I'm so grateful. Thank you very much.
Oh, here you are. Okay.
So she don't want to tell us.
No, I'm trying to get my screen on.
You don't need a screen. You just need to say what you think.
Okay.
Take that down so we can hear you.
Okay.
There you go.
So we are if I were on camera, you would see that I had a mask on because this is being done at a time of an unprecedented global pandemic. So when you're asking about what the next risk is, are you asking about market risk? Are you asking about, I mean, we have been in a sideways market for quite some time now in distillate, and we have the question about, will either we'll be looking at a vaccine coming in the next several months, and that will be the most bullish event, or will the other shoe drop when we see a resurgence in cases in the fall, as many have predicted? I don't know. That's why people hedge, and that's the whole point of this question.
Yeah, I think that that's right, and I would have said also I think weather is going to become more important because we've seen long-term weather cycles change. Something like the last 10 hottest winters have occurred in like the last 10 years. That may not be quite the right statistic, but the idea is we've all experienced how warm things are getting and what the risk from that might be. So you might want to consider that as you look forward to what can harm your business going forward. And Eric, you said there was a call or a question?
Yes, and I think it's one that builds off of that in some degree. It's a little more specific. Alan, what is your fourth quarter prediction for ULSHO?
Higher.
Wow.
I'm not going to give. I don't know what the number will be, but we've been through a period that is unfamiliar to all of us. No one's had quite the experience that this year has given us. If you look at what's going on, there's plenty of product around. There are many bearish things happening in the world, a lot of uncertainty. It is true that we're recovering from the lows that we saw in April and May, but nonetheless, it's not a market that is showing much impetus to growth, but even more, it's not showing any impetus to fall. And I have to ask myself why that might be. I don't really have an answer. It may be what Elaine said, changes in possibly vaccines and other environmental issues. But I think that my winter forecast is higher than we are now because of these emerging improvements that we'll see through the rest of the year. It's a fair question.
Okay, thank you. Let me go over here. What impact will the U.S. election have on energy markets?
I think if, wow. Assuming a kind of regular world, okay, which is very difficult to do, particularly in light of the events the past few days and weeks. I'm sorry. What was the question again?
What impact will the U.S. election have on energy markets?
I think that we'll see reemergence of some production here in the United States, which could limit our upside. And I believe that will happen irrespective of who is involved. The other change that might be important is, again, depending upon who winds up the winner of all this. The other thing is what the effect of environmental regulation might be. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but a Trump victory might ease those back even further. A Biden victory could very well bring us in the other direction. But I would just say this, what we've seen is that people are very serious about environmental change. They are willing to spend a little bit more for gasoline. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. Willing to spend more for electricity, and we have companies who actually sell electricity on the theory that it's made from biofuels instead of gas or coal, and that they're willing to pay that extra price. So I think some of these factors are bigger than the election. You may get moves one way or the other, but I think the longer term situation is such that environmental improvement is here to stay. And I believe that will transcend what the effect of the election might be.
That is a very interesting perspective.
Oh, hey, if you want to disagree, no. I think that's great.
No, I don't want to disagree. I think that is, regardless of what happens federally, it will be incremental one way or the other. I mean, we saw a dramatic increase in oil production with Obama as the president. There was the political talk that there was a war on coal that was political in nature, but it was really more fracking in nature that was the war on coal than it was any specific policy. So I tend to agree with you that the market and that people's preferences, regardless of how they're deriving those preferences, whether they think that it's sound energy policy or they're political in it, it's that we're seeing a change, and that the political change will be impactful at the margins, but overall the trend line is as you showed in that first graph, and you saw a little bit of the beginning of a hockey stick on the renewable, granted a flatter hockey stick, but still an up curve on renewable, even though it's still a small overall percentage of market share.
Yeah, I think the ultimate answer, and if I were advising you as my customer, I would say that my long-term perspectives would more be awareness of the environment and the fact that Americans are embracing the need to deal with that issue. So.
And the one thing that I will say to from my perspective is that renewable, as you see petroleum decline and renewable increase for those that are involved in the distribution of liquid heating fuel, that this is that there is, whether it's renewable diesel, biodiesel, whatever it is that is, if you're in the business of distributing energy, we need to be looking at that, because regardless, again, of whatever a federal policy is, if you look at what's happening in the northeastern states, that's happening under a very this electrification of everything that we're fighting here in the middle Atlantic and New England states is happening when you have federal policy that would be forced squarely on our side, but nevertheless we've got a challenge here, and that to the extent whether you like it or not, if you want to still be in the business of distributing a liquid heating fuel, you're going to need to take that into account, and regardless of whether or not your state or territory mandates you to distribute something, if that's what customers are looking for, that's what we need to be willing to adapt and change to.
Well, I really do agree with what you're saying, but I want to point out it doesn't have to be liquid. We may go to an entirely new delivery device. We're making tremendous progress in batteries, for example. Somebody's going to have to deal with that. Somebody's going to have to service that. This is all brand new. You have to keep open. You have to keep watching. I would also say, because the federal government has not been terribly proactive, we've seen the states get together in multi-state compacts now, and most immediately on purchase of equipment in connection with the COVID. But states have gotten together to that. The thing that we've never had to think much about, most of us, is that states are sovereign as well. And so I do think that all of this will be what will move us forward over the long term. I think it's a great question as well.
There is actually a statistic that is, my recitation of it will be dated, I saw it about this time last year that as of then, 26 states representing 40% of the US economy had adopted some sort of carbon cap and trade limitation, so that you are seeing this, to underscore the point about whatever change happens federally is more at the margin. And I don't want to understate, I don't want to, pardon me, I don't want to dramatize it in some way that there isn't a difference. There is, but you're already seeing states moving. And when you've got almost 40% of the economy heading in some type of in the direction of some type of fossil fuel restriction and push to renewable, it really, what happens at the federal level is incremental. It's important, but it's incremental.
Yes, I agree with that and entirely. Nature abhors a vacuum,
right? And
basically at the federal level, that's what we have. And so the states are now moving in to fulfill that. I was just going to say, you can produce bio-natural gas here on the Eastern Shore and get credits for it from California. Remarkable.
Yeah, the state government, with the exception of war, foreign policy, and obviously tax policy, on a minute-by-minute basis, what happens in your state capital is far more impactful than what happens in the national capital on a day in, day out basis. We don't appreciate how much of our lives our governors and state legislatures control, because they don't get the profile, obviously, that the president and Congress. So I see there's no further question in that function, and let me go to this function, and I do not see anything there. So I'm going to say, going once as far as questions are concerned. Do you have a follow-up or other type of, well, not a follow-up, a brand new question? Twice. Okay, that will then conclude the questions. Alan, if any of you are interested in this, receiving Alan's presentation, you can reach out to Alan. If you don't know how to get a hold of Alan, certainly reach out to Eastern Energy Expo. We'd be happy to put you in touch. Better yet, visit Powerhouse's booth on the virtual trade show, as Powerhouse is one of the approximately 125, give or take, that we have participating with us in this new format. Reminder that this program and all of the other programs that we're running live at 10 a.m. will be housed on the Eastern Energy Expo website for the month of August, and then in September moved to our YouTube channel in perpetuity of the universe. Please, again, be sure to visit our exhibitors on the virtual trade show floor. We will be back Monday morning at 10 a.m. With Erica Lenore about customer service, specifically stop providing customer service, which is a fancy way of saying provide customer service differently and better. And that we will have an announcement next week. This is late breaking news, a little bit of a tease that on Monday, August 31st, we were not scheduled to have a program. However, as a result of COVID and the fact that the heating season is less than 6 weeks away, we are going to have a late entry program that we will be in a position to formally announce the title and the participants next week. But Monday, August 31st at 10 a.m., if you are in a business that delivers heating oil or propane, you're going to want to be in front of your screen on Monday the 31st, just as you wanted to be in your screen for the prior program. So thank you all. Thank you, Alan and Elaine, for your insight in friendship and mentorship, if that is such a word, as always. And we will see you all Monday. Godspeed and stay safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.